In today's lesson, the first lesson of Module 2, we start exploring the sinister world of cybercrime. We're going to be looking more closely at network threats, such as the difference between active and passive attacks, and the security required to prevent them. In today's lesson, we will distinguish between active and passive network threats. We will compare network vulnerabilities and attacks by examining examples, and we will demonstrate how to detect network attacks on a system and ways to prevent them. In reality, there are over 10 billion connected devices constantly sending traffic around the world. Protecting all these devices has been the challenge of big tech companies for decades. The key question that is always asked when a network is attacked is how? How did it happen? So let's start by trying to answer this question. What is a network attack? In simple terms, a network attack is an attempt to forcefully gain unauthorized access to a network or data. The attack could be to steal data or simply to create chaos. So how do attackers gain access to a company's network? Attackers gain access by exploiting the vulnerability within a company network. In most cases, this can take a lot of time and technical know-how. If an attacker succeeds, they can have total control of the entire network. Pretty scary, right? That's why it's critical for companies to patch any vulnerability they find in their system to protect their resources and assets. So what are network vulnerabilities? Network vulnerability is simply hiding flaws, loopholes, or even weaknesses in a network system. In big companies, assets, resources, and data are often attacked and exploited. Companies are constantly faced with threats, and so they have to be on guard all the time. Let's look at a quick user story. Honeywell is a company with 100 employees. Due to financial pressure, the company director decided to let go of 10 employees, 4 from the HR department, 5 from sales, and 1 information technology officer. On the last day of work for all these employees, the IT department forgot to disable their accounts. This creates a serious security vulnerability because it means those employees still have access to key company resources such as login details, usernames, or user IDs from business credit cards, and even the contact details of the top executives. If any one of the previous employees are disgruntled, they could use this to disrupt the system. Companies constantly need to be aware of and check for vulnerabilities within their network, and if necessary, to pay professionals at times to test their system for any weaknesses. So how do they do it? For an attacker to be successful with an attack, they must be able to gain access to the network and elevate their access within the network to administrator before being able to fully control the network. Most attackers usually execute and run their attack from a remote location. They either use an executable command within a document, or they attack specific servers within the network. Another common way is by embedding executable code in an email, and once the mail is opened, the attacker will be able to get information such as the IP address, type of operation system of the victim, and the keystroke of the victim, which are words typed on the victim's devices. They could even get access to the victim's browsing history and any saved passwords, depending on the type of executable code that is used. Did you know? According to a Microsoft Security Intelligence report, more than 45% of malware is introduced into a victim's network via email. Attackers design and create emails to trick a user into clicking on a link, which gives the attacker vital information to gain access to the victim's network. While many attacks are designed to disrupt the company's operations rather than silently gathering resources, the most disruptive are DOS attacks. DOS stands for Denial of Service. Denial of Service attacks overwhelm network devices such as web servers, email gateways, routers, and switches, and in this way, they prevent the victim from being able to access their system. In more sophisticated attacks, the attacker combines denial of service with email campaigns, camouflaging the attack as a network issue. The victim thinks there is a general problem, but in reality, they have been distracted by the attacker. We'll talk a bit more about DOS attacks later. So who is attacking our network? In cybersecurity, there are specific names that are used to classify or categorize attackers. Not all attackers or hackers are bad. Some hackers only hack into other users' network to test the strength or weakness of the system. Any weaknesses are reported to the company or user in question to be addressed. There are 3 main classes of hackers: white hat hackers, gray hat hackers, and black hat hackers. White hat hackers are the good guys. Basically, white hat hackers are ethical hackers with very good programming skills. They mostly work in partnership with companies. A white hat hacker might test a system's application for vulnerabilities and report the vulnerabilities to the company before they are exploited. Or they may work for the company and their job is the security and monitoring of the network. Gray hat hackers sometimes commit crimes and violate laws or ethical standards, but they are not malicious or evil. They don't do this for personal gain or to cause damage and disruption, but simply to see if they're able to gain access to a system or network. Gray hat hackers can cause a lot of damage to a system, but generally, once they have accessed it, they would disclose the vulnerability to the company for them to fix it. Black hat hackers. These are your typical bad guys. They have no morals and ethics, and they're mostly criminals with the sole purpose of hacking for personal gain or just for the fun of causing disruption within a company network. Did you know the term black hat hacker came from old Western movies where the bad guy always wears a black cowboy hat? You may have also come across the term threat actors. These can be states, groups, or individuals who take advantage of vulnerabilities. Some of the more common types of threat actors are state-sponsored, white or black hats who steal government secrets, gather intelligence, and sabotage networks. Targets are generally foreign governments, terrorist groups, and corporations. Then you have your cyber criminals, black hats stealing billions from consumers and businesses. Then you get your hacktivists, gray hats who rally and protest against political and social ideas. They post articles and videos to leak sensitive information. Then you have your vulnerability brokers, discovering exploits and reporting them to vendors, sometimes for prizes and rewards. And lastly, you get your script kiddies. These are inexperienced hackers running existing tools and exploiting to cause harm, but typically not for profit. You might be wondering how it is possible for these attackers to breach company networks. They do it by using specific network tools. Sadly, the internet has facilitated the sharing of more and more sophisticated network tools to conduct intense network attacks. Let's look at some of the network tools that are used by both cybersecurity personnel and hackers. Password crackers. They help to guess and crack the passwords of systems such as web servers and email gateways. Wireless hacking tools aids users to hack into wireless network and also helps to detect vulnerabilities in wireless devices. Network scanning tools used to probe a network device, servers, and hosts for open ports. Packet crafting tools. They help to create and probe packets that can be sent to other connected network devices, servers, and even hosts. Packet sniffers. As we saw in the last lesson of Module 1, these help to capture and analyze packets within traditional Ethernet on local area networks or wireless local area networks. Then you have your rootkit detectors. They are directory and file integrity checkers used by white hats to detect installed rootkits and malicious applications installed on a system. And then you get fuzzers, which help users discover a computer system security vulnerability. Another vehicle for forensic tools, and a good example, is Wireshark. With this tool, users are able to sniff out any trace of evidence existing in a particular computer system or even from captured network traffic. Debugger tools help to reverse engineer binary files when writing exploits or malware analysis. Hacking operating systems are pre-designed and dedicated operating systems used to conduct cybersecurity tasks. A good example is the CyberOps workstation. These operating systems are preloaded with network tools and technologies to help with hacking. Encryption tools use algorithm structures to encode or decode data to prevent unauthorized users from gaining access to encrypted data. Vulnerability exploitation tools help to determine if a remote host is vulnerable to a security attack while connected on a network. And then vulnerability scanners scan a network or system to identify open ports. Statistics on network threats and attacks have revealed a variety of motives for launching an attack. In this section, we'll walk through some common network attacks. So what are some of the most common forms of network threats? Eavesdropping, capturing and listening to network traffic without authorization from the user. Eavesdropping is usually carried out in secret, so the user may not be aware of the activity for a long time. Then we have data modification. In the case of data modification, the attacker is able to capture data and make modifications to it. The data is modified either by removing segments or by adding extra segments and resending it back to the user. This is often done by attackers with a lot of technical know-how. Then you get IP address spoofing. By masking an IP address, it would seem the IP packet originated from a valid address. This approach is mostly used by attackers to lure users to log in on a malicious web portal disguised as a legitimate corporate extranet. And then we have password-based attack. Now, this is when an attacker gains access to a valid account, in most cases an email account, and uses the account to obtain other users' information. As already mentioned with DOS attacks, the attacker is able to fully prevent the user from accessing their system or network for a period of time. Man in the middle is a very common threat and is very difficult to detect, as can be seen in the diagram. The attacker is able to monitor traffic from the victim's network and redirect all the traffic to pass through their network. The attacker could then choose to modify the data or inspect the content before resending the data out to the internet. This process is reverted when data comes from the internet into the victim's network. Then you have compromised key. Do you remember that when we previously mentioned the IPsec, we said that it is able to encrypt data? This is mostly done with hash algorithms in the form of a combination of a string of numbers. If that number is obtained, the attacker will be able to decrypt encrypted data sent through the VPN, the virtual private network. Then we have sniffer. As we saw in the previous lesson, the sniffer is software that is embedded into a hardware adapter, which changes the mode to promiscuous mode. This enables the adapter to monitor, capture, and even analyze data in communication over a network. Other common network security threats you might have come across include worms, Trojan horse, SQL injection attack, rootkit, malicious software, phishing, adware, and spyware. But by far the most common threat is viruses. Apparently, according to recent stats, 33% of all operational computers have had viruses or been exposed to malware. So what exactly is malware? Malware, in the simplest term, is a malicious piece of software. It is software that is solely created with the intention of causing damage to users or entire enterprise networks. Let's look at some of the categories of malware. We will talk about viruses, Trojan horse, worms, ransomware, and a selection of other malware. First up, viruses. A computer virus is a class of malware that is often seen. That's because a hacker or attacker can very easily create a piece of software that can execute or even replicate itself once it has made its way into a victim's computer. So how does a virus get transmitted? A virus could be embedded into a legitimate piece of software. This is known as crack software because the hacker embeds malicious code in paid software and rehosts the software for free. It spreads very quickly and easily when something is sent from a computer infected by a virus to another user, or by inserting malicious USB memory drives and CDs into a computer, or as already mentioned, through email. Viruses can lay dormant in a user's system or even network until they are activated at a specific time on a specific date by the attacker. A Trojan horse, or Trojan, is a class of malware that is often disguised as legitimate software. It is a good example of crack software in which hackers rehost paid software for free to lure users who think they're getting a legitimate free version. A word of caution: don't download a free version of software that is rehosted on the internet. How does Trojan malware get transmitted? Trojan malware is often found attached to online games or paid-for software like Adobe. Once the malware is loaded on the victim's computer, it can self-elevate the privilege on the victim's computer to run efficiently. In some cases, the malware can be controlled remotely while the user is connected to the internet, creating a backdoor for the attacker. Did you know? Trojan malware was adopted from the Greek mythology where Achilles and other soldiers hide in a Trojan horse at the gates of Troy to gain access into the city. You get different types of Trojan horse classifications, such as remote access Trojan horse, which enables unauthorized remote access to a victim's computer. Data sending Trojan horse. The attacker will be able to view sensitive data from the victim's computer, such as their browsing history and saved passwords. This information is sent to the attacker each time the victim is connected to the internet. Then we have destructive Trojan horse. Once loaded onto the victim's computer, this malware corrupts the entire hard drive storage and starts initializing a delete sequence to delete all the files on the computer. Proxy Trojan horse. Often used by a more advanced hacker. In this case, the victim's data is not tampered with, but the hacker often redirects the traffic to the victim's IP address, so it seems like the victim is the hacker. This enables the hacker to mask his real identity so he can perform illegal activities. FTP Trojan horse. Now, this enables the hacker to access a machine using the FTP protocol in order to perform unauthorized file transfer services between hackers' end devices and the victim's end device. Security software disabler Trojan horse can stop antivirus programs or firewalls from functioning on the victim's computer whenever the Trojan needs to perform any task. This way, the victim will not be alerted to any viruses in their system. DOS Trojan horse. Once this type of Trojan is loaded onto the victim's network, it greatly slows or even halts network connectivity. Often, the victim becomes aware of the slow connection whenever they are connected over the internet. Worms. A worm is seen to be very dangerous once loaded on a victim's system because it will execute arbitrary code and often replicate and install itself in different parts of the system's hard drive to avoid detection. A worm attack consists of three main components, which are exploiting vulnerability. The worm installs itself using an exploit mechanism such as an email attachment, an executable file, or a Trojan horse by simply exploiting vulnerability within the system. Propagation mechanism. After gaining access to a device, the worm replicates itself and locates new areas where it cannot be easily detected. And then payload. Any malicious code that results in some action is a payload, which is used to create a backdoor that allows a threat actor access to the infected host or to create a DOS attack. Ransomware is mostly used by black hat hackers. This type of malware infects the victim's system and encrypts either a portion or the entire storage. Then the hacker requests some form of compensation before releasing the encrypted storage. How does ransomware actually work? When malware in form of a ransomware is introduced in a system, it denies access to the infected computer system or its data. Cyber criminals often use this means to demand payment or other forms of compensation before releasing the computer system. Ransomware mostly works with an encryption algorithm to encrypt system files and data. It cannot be easily decrypted unless payment is made. It is often introduced in a system by email or malicious advertising. Social engineering is a tactic by cyber criminal use to get users to load these sorts of malware. They do this by contacting the users and claiming to be security technicians from Microsoft, antivirus companies, or even Apple. There are other forms of malware we feel should be mentioned. These include spyware, which is used to gather information about a target user. That information is sent to the hacker or the attacker's computer. This is done without the consent of the user. Spyware often comes in different forms and could be embedded in ads, cookies, and on Trojan software. Adware. This type of malware is very frequently seen, and it's been adopted by advertising companies, where a user sees pop-ups of ads on websites they visit. In most cases, the ads follow the users to different websites. The adware is generated solely to generate a revenue for the owner. Phishing, another very common malware where cyber criminals attempt to convince victims to give out sensitive information such as their social security number, banking details, address, telephone, PIN number to ATM cards, etc., by simply sending emails and posing to be from a legitimate source. And then we have rootkits. Once installed on a compromised system, this software continues to hide its intrusion and providing privileged access to the threat actor. There are 4 main ways in which threats are carried out: structured threats, unstructured threats, external and internal threats. Let's look a bit closer at each one. A structured threat is one which most companies and businesses pray never occurs. This type of threat is often carried out by a group of hackers or attackers who collectively share a common goal to cause disruption to a specific system or network. The people behind these threats are proficient perpetrators who are very skilled and have a lot of technical know-how. And by combining and planning, they stand a better chance of breaching a system. The motives for a structured attack could be political, religious, for profit, or sometimes just to boost morale between the hackers. An unstructured threat is clearly the opposite of a structured one, in that the group or perpetrators is disorganized. There is little or no planning, and the group mostly consists of amateurs or attackers with restrictive skill sets. In most cases, the motive is based on pure boredom. The intent may or may not be to cause disruption, and the attackers often display a complete lack of sense as to ensuing the impact. An external threat is a form of attack executed by perpetrators outside the organization or a company's network. The external threat could either be structured or unstructured, and the perpetrator will have to gather a lot of information to understand the kind of system they are attacking. The attackers will need to breach the security of the system before being able to elevate the privileges in the system. An internal threat is something that companies and big businesses continually fight to get rid of. It's the enemy within, where the attacker works in the organization and knows how to access the system without being detected. The perpetrators have a lot of knowledgeable insight about the system network, which makes it easy for them to launch their attack. The motive of an internal threat is often based on the employee being unsatisfied or disgruntled. Categories of network attacks. There are 2 broad categories of network attacks. Passive attacks. Now, these are activities such as wiretapping and idle scans that are designed to intercept traffic traveling through the network. The perpetrator monitors and steals information without being detected. And when done, he or she would leave the system undamaged. Active attacks are activities such as denial of service, DOS attacks, and SQL injection attacks, where the attacker attempts to execute commands to disrupt the network or system. Active attacks are detectable with monitoring software like antiviruses. The main difference between passive and active attacks is that the attacker in an active attack can interrupt the transferred information with the aim of intercepting the connection and adjusting the information and could be detected. However, in a passive attack, the attacker can only intercept the information to read or analyze it without making any alterations to it, thereby staying undetectable. There are certain steps an attacker is most likely to take to carry out a successful attack. These are broken down into 3 major categories: reconnaissance, access, and denial of service, DOS. Let's explore these 3 stages to fully understand how an attack usually works. Reconnaissance generally refers to information gathering or surveying. It is the first step of an attack, where the attacker maps out the system or the network. He or she will need to survey the intended system or network to map vulnerabilities and get the information needed to break in. Reconnaissance is a technique used by gray and black hat hackers. During the reconnaissance stage, a threat actor could use network tools like Google search or public information from DNS registries with dig, NSLOOKUP, and whois commands to gather initial information about the target. The attacker could initiate a ping sweep of the target networks to identify those connected to it, like this. With this information, the threat actor will then be able to know the devices connected to the internet on that particular network. Once they know the active IP address, the threat actor will be able to initiate a dedicated port scanning on all these addresses to see which ports are open that could be exploited. With network tools like Nmap, Superscan, Angry IP Scanner, and NetScan, a threat actor will be able to see your open ports and other vital information on the target computers. Once the threat actor has all of the information he or she needs, accessing a network is relatively easy. Let's imagine that while doing the reconnaissance, the threat actor notices that an FTP, remember, that's a file transfer protocol, port 21 was open. So he or she can use that to try and gain access. The attacker will then try to escalate their access privileges to give him or her full access to that system. Okay, so you get various types of access attacks. These include password attacks, which is attempting to discover vital system or administrative passwords using phishing attacks or brute force attacks to gain access into the system. Trust exploitation is a common method by which threat actors elevate their access by using a trusted host to gain access to the rest of the network. Port redirection, as previously mentioned, the threat actor will use a compromised system as a base for attacks against other users in the network, simply by redirecting traffic to the destination they need access to. Spoofing. This could be IP, MAC, or DHCP spoofing, where one device attempts to pose as another by falsifying in the network. Social engineering attacks were mentioned earlier. This is where the attacker manipulates connected users to perform actions or give out confidential information. In most cases, the information needed to access a network. Examples of social engineering attacks include pre-texting. Now, this involves presenting yourself as someone else and pretending to need personal or financial data to confirm the identity of the recipient. Spam. Using email to trick and lure users into clicking on a malicious link or to download a malware-infected file. Something for something. Quid pro quo. Now, this involves requesting personal information in exchange for something like a free gift. A good example will be a survey on a web page that says complete this and win a brand new iPhone. Tailgating. When an attacker follows an unauthorized person with a corporate badge into a badge-secure location, knowing full well that they should not be in that location. Baiting. The threat actor leaves a malware-infected physical device, such as a USB flash drive, in an area where it will be seen and picked up. when the person checks the content the malware is loaded on their system. Visual hacking. This involves physically observing the victim entering their credentials at a workstation or ATM. We have mentioned DOS attacks already, but I would like to look at them more closely as they are a very common form of cyber attack. As we've said, threat actors overwhelm a target device with a huge amount of traffic or specially formatted packets to cause an interruption of the service to the user. As you can see in the diagram, the threat actor is able to overwhelm the server simply by sending too many ping requests. The server has to respond to all the requests, and in the process, it ignores any other requests. You also get DDoS attacks. These are distributed denial of service attacks and are an advancement of the DOS attack. DDoS attacks are more efficient than your regular DOS attack because they compromise many hosts from multiple locations to a dedicated destination. Did you know there is a specific terminology associated with a DDoS attack, such as zombies, the group of compromised hosts or agents, and bots, the malicious code or malware that has been programmed to infect the victim's computer. Bots can get information such as logins to the system, keystrokes, so words typed on the keyboard, saved passwords, etc. Botnets refer to a group of zombies infected by the use of self-propagating malware and handlers as the masters in control of the group of zombies. Okay, to illustrate, the threat actor creates or purchases a botnet of zombie hosts. The zombie hosts' computers continue to scan and infect more targets, creating more zombies. When ready, the threat actor then uses handler systems to make the botnet of zombies launch the DDoS attack on a specific target. Easy, right? You got it? Probably not. We agree it all sounds a bit like gibberish. It is a good idea to understand common malware behavior so that you can recognize when your system has been compromised. So how do you know if your system has been compromised? When a computer has been infected with malware, there are certain behaviors you can expect. These include strange file extensions in the file storage or sometimes in the document, or even strange applications appearing that haven't been installed. Antivirus and firewall programs are turned off, and there's a prompt to reconfigure device settings. Your computer screen is freezing or the system is crashing. Emails are spontaneously sent to your contact list without your knowledge. Files are modified or deleted. Storage space seems to increase dramatically. You notice an increase in CPU and/or memory usage. You could get an error when initially connecting to networks. That is, you get an error the first time, and the second time it connects properly. Slow speeds and broken connection. Unknown processes or services running on the computer. Unknown TCP or UDP ports opened, and the computer automatically connecting to the internet without user action. So how do threat actors avoid detection? Threat actors are constantly coming up with new ways to evade detection. Some of the methods they make use of include the encryption of their network, VPN IP tunneling. IP tunneling was covered briefly when we discussed IPsec and the extranet, and we'll hear more about VPN in Module 3. Data modification, breaking down the IP packet and modifying it to look legitimate. And then traffic insertion, where the attacker places himself between the victim and the network and is able to insert malicious traffic into the victim's network. The final question we would like to address in this lesson is, how do you identify network security threats? Here are the most common ways to detect threat actors. Enable your network visibility. This is the first way to detect threat actors in a system. The company needs to configure the system so that it is fully in control. We will look at the issue of network visibility in more detail in future lessons, but essentially, it is about the system administrator being able to see the entire system in order to immediately detect any abnormality. System administrators and network engineers need to know the flow of data in their network and have put in place different authentication blocks. Network access. Who needs to access what and why do they need access should always be a priority. Companies need to structure the organization in a way that each employee's access is solely based on the work they perform. A good example will be the sales team asking for access for an IT project. The bottom line is that not every user should be given access to the entire network. Firewall configuration. As mentioned in previous lessons, firewalls can be used as the first line of defense in a network, where the firewall can prevent unauthorized access and internet-based attacks from disbanding the computer networks. System administrators can set specific instructions to control the flow of data on their network. With a firewall in place, reconnaissance attacks such as IP scanning or port sweeping could be blocked and prevented. Limited access to updates and installation. Realistic malicious code has to be loaded and installed on the machine. So by preventing the code from being installed, it stops the system from being hacked. On a connected system, it is a good idea to always change the administrative password and log in into the system, so that if an application has to be loaded and installed, it'll always require the administrator to physically put in their password.